Hello, I'm Frances Ford, the artistic director of the War Plays Project. This project was started to use spoken word theater, poetry, in this case, interviews, to start conversation about the effects of war, to start conversations in coffee houses or classrooms or wherever we can reach people thinking of taking up military service. What you're going to see today is VetSpeak, a collection of interviews with military men and conscientious objectors from several of the United States wars. You're going to hear a variety of views, and we hope they'll help you to start conversations, to think about possible military service or perhaps possibly not serving. Thank you for taking time to watch. Jack, I understand you were a conscientious objector, a pacifist, even before college.
I realized my thinking against war began very early. For example, my father fought in World War I, and he told me a story about being on a battlefield after a battle, and his buddies were picking up things off the bodies, and one of them brought him a German belt buckle, which said, Gott mit uns. And that means God with us, and as a boy, I was astounded to see that and hear about it because the Germans were the bad guys, and how could they say God with us? But that made me think, and the point I couldn't any longer have just the point of view of our side. I began to think about both sides in a war.
So what was your experience? You registered as a conscientious objector, which was legal during World War II.
Yes, in World War II there was a category, a classification for conscientious objectors. In World War I there was not. And this was a new innovation. And the churches between the wars had brought this about by their political pressures. And the country agreed that there should be a provision for those who object to fighting.
So what was your first job?
Well, I was drafted and sent to a soil conservation camp in Indiana because the law said something like that those who are opposed to war may be given work of national importance under civilian direction. And so after that, I was sent to another camp in North Dakota, and while I was there doing soil conservation, some scientists from the University of Minnesota came through recruiting guinea pigs, offered a chance to volunteer to be guinea pigs in experiments on vitamins. And this was a new development. The opportunities for service were being expanded. We were going to be given a certain diet, a chemical diet for 9 months, and we had to sign a waiver that we would not claim any damages. Experimentally, we were on 4 different levels of intake of B vitamins, and it was all secret, double blind. Neither the subjects nor the scientists knew who was on which level of intake. I found out afterwards that I had been on the lowest level, and I ended up with experimental beriberi, which is a deficiency of vitamin B. The job was on the next guinea pig experiment, which was the famous starvation experiment. I was not a starver, but there were 36 conscientious objectors who volunteered to have their weight brought down by 1/3 over a 9-month period. Well, that including the recovery time. Oh. So, and they were willing to starve themselves because the benefit would be the scientific knowledge of how to rehabilitate war-torn populations who were, in fact, starving because of the food blockade in Europe. Oh. And every day, each man had several tests, and I scheduled them all. My job was to schedule the 36 men through a dozen tests every day. Well, it was a hardship, tremendous. And psychologically, since it was so deep that even among us, those of us who were not starving were deeply resented. They couldn't help resenting us because they were starving and we were eating. The psychological effects were powerful. One effect was you cannot expect people who are hungry to care about democracy or anything political. So if you want to restore democracy in Europe, you have to feed the people first. I'm confident because, you know, war is still the greatest scourge of humanity. Just think what goes on in war. All the crimes of civilian life occur in war. And we are convinced that the harm done by war is much greater than the benefits.
You know, there were people who said when they saw the camps, when they rode in on the jeeps and were greeted by living skeletons trying to walk toward their jeeps, that they wished they'd done more. How do you deal with those feelings?
Yes, well, of course, one can question oneself. Life is ambiguous. I don't claim simple answers. I think it's probably true that many of the men in the military question themselves whether they had made the right decision. We know that's true because many men have testified, for example, fighting in Vietnam. Afterwards, they have deep regrets about what they themselves had been doing there in the terms of killing civilians. And we know that many of the fighting men suffered great trauma, not just because of the fear which they did experience, but the things they found themselves doing, which were totally unacceptable. I'm convinced that the main reason so many men don't want to talk about their war experience is that it was not just suffering, but it was the horrible crimes that they themselves had to do toward innocent people. Look at this war now. It's many people who thought it was necessary to go in are now saying it's not worth it. There's a huge, maybe even a majority of Americans who say, given what's happening there, it was not worth it to go to fight in Iraq. What was it like to be 19 and shipped for a month over to Vietnam?
Scary. War is not the, it's not the most fun thing humans engage in. Not exactly something I wanted to do.
Well, you've been at base camp where? Boot camp?
Boot camp, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
And how long was boot camp?
Just a couple months.
And then you're on the troop ship?
No, then after that they train you, and after that I went to Oklahoma and was trained in interior and exterior ballistics, learning how to do my job. And thought I had a deferment, but they wanted a lot of warm bodies, and I was low man on the totem pole. And
okay, so there was no deferment for being in school. And what were your choices? If you weren't drafted, what would happen if you didn't accept the draft?
Well, that was before the conscientious objector status or anything like that. So it was either Leavenworth or Vietnam. I could, the writing was on the wall, and I looked at them both and thought about how much time would be spent in both, and evaluated, my circumstances. So being an internal optimist, I thought I'd do better going to Vietnam. So. first got there, just the jungle itself, the smell, the green, the size of the plants and animals, it was like stepping into National Geographic. It was gorgeous. The huge old trees, and it was really beautiful.
And when you left?
And when I left, I'll never forget, I turned around, I looked out the back of that C-130 and scanned the horizon, and it looked like I was in the middle of a garbage dump. All I could see was broken things, brown mud, and no green.
No green?
No green. No green.
And that's what, there was Agent Orange, Agent
White, Agent Blue, everything is coded. The area where I was at, it was supposed to have received the heaviest dose of defoliants of any place on the planet. Everybody that I know that was up there has problems.
Oh, you do today, too?
Oh, I do. Yes, I do. And so does my daughter and my grandson. This is, when you have chemicals of that toxicity, it takes thousands of generations to get them out of the system.
So didn't you guys know? I mean, when they sprayed you, did you get wet? Didn't you have a way to hide?
I'm worried about shrapnel and bullets more than I am a mist.
Oh, of course.
You know, my number one, I had one goal when I got over there, and that was to go home and not in a body bag. I wanted to go home breathing in one piece. She threw a grenade into one of our ammo trucks and reduced it to a pile of scrap real fast. But it was, like I was telling you before, to me it was like one of those clarifying moments. I thought about it the whole day. I mean, it was, the first impact was that, you know, something else was going to happen, that when my life is threatened and the person next to me, that's the first response. But as the day wore on, you stop and think about what sort of conviction this person would have to go against a group of people by yourself to do something like that. And you have to have somebody that was really pissed off. You know, she was wrong. And that
and
told me something.
what did the Marines do to her afterward?
Well, she died instantly. There was nothing left of her. My job was to put steel on target using primarily artillery or whatever, rockets.
And you were really good at that.
I excelled. I hate to say it, and when I look back at my life now and I think of what are some of the outstanding things that you've done in your life, it's not something I'm super proud of.
What had happened to the man that you replaced in the 101st?
Oh, when it was to my second outfit, well, he died from a grenade. He made a mistake, if you wanted to be technical about it. Whenever you pull in for the night or try and get some sleep, usually you take your C ration cans and you put a grenade in them, take the pin out, run a string or a wire or something over to another one. And that way, if somebody tries to wake you up, they're dead before you are. And he blew it. Literally, he blew it. It's, you know, just, war is carnage. I don't know how to explain it. I've seen a movie, it was Apocalypse Now, and there was a word that was used during the movie that I thought was so apropos, being a person that was out on the end of the road, out in nowhere's land. And they were just talking about the horror of it all. And that's the best way I can summarize it. You see a lot of people show up over there, the green recruits, thinking they're John Wayne, and they learn very fast that there's nothing glorious about death and dying and killing somebody. It's, you know, it's carnage. You grind up everything, animals to...
Yes, you said when that mist of Agent Orange, Blue, or White went over everything it touched, just
yeah, it turns brown, and all the animals, any cows or birds or whatever miscarry. It's some heavy-duty stuff. It turns everything brown.
wow.
And it starts immediately. That's the funny part is there wasn't any, in my opinion, there wasn't any mechanism or system. And thank God that we've learned a little bit since then. I'm really proud of people in this country, how they're treating the vets now. It's not their fault that politicians make stupid decisions. But when I came back, vets were treated real bad.
Well, you described to me what you did with all your back pay.
Oh, see, I unwound. I didn't receive any pay over there because there's no stores or anything, no place to spend it. So I had over a year's pay coming, and basically I drank it. I'm still unwinding. I don't think about it as much, but I'm still unwinding.
Because you were recently diagnosed with post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Right.
But it was only within the last, what, 5 years or something?
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Amazing.
Yeah, some friends urged me to go over to the VA and talk to them. I was trying to get some help on some other medical items, and they had me talk to a shrink, and I guess I've got a couple of problems. It's like any ism, you know. It's one day at a time. If you really truly want to survive,
and you do.
I am a survivor.
Yeah.
I am a survivor. I wish that they were getting the whole picture, because that recruiter and that government is not telling you the truth. They are just using you as a vehicle to attain their means. They'll tell you anything and promise you anything to get your body into one of those uniforms and your hands on one of those weapons. That's what it's all about.
Or was, for your experience, a partial conscientious objector?
A partial conscientious objector is one who is classified that way, a 1AO who is classified that way because he refuses to be trained with weapons. And you go into the Army, you are inducted into the Army, and you go through basic training, but no weapons are seen. We don't train with weapons at all. But what we do get is a considerable amount of training in first aid and medical and that sort of thing, so we could be medics to a platoon or to in a hospital or whatever.
Is that choice possible for young people today?
Well, right now, people aren't able to make that choice because there is no draft. It's only possible that that choice can be made when and if there's a draft and the person gets an induction order. I was trained in the evangelical church. I could not follow Jesus and be a person who's trained to kill other human beings. In the process of working that through myself, in terms of studying theology, studying the Bible, all of that, I believed that I still wanted to do something for my country at that time. And in fact, this was in 1958. And I applied for and got a partial conscientious objector status. And when I got my induction order, I then went off to training without weapons. I took some tests and I qualified for a different kind of work in a hospital. That was to become a psychometric. It was a person who was trained in all the various psychological tests. I had that as a what they call MOS, Military Occupational Specialty. When I got to my post at Valley Forge Army Hospital in Pennsylvania, at Valley Forge, they announced to me that yes, I had that training and there was a mental hospital there, but they were all full up in that particular military occupational specialty. And what happened then is I had a slot in the message room. So I ended up walking for months, walking around the hospital, handing out mail to the various departments, getting to know all the nurses and the various doctors. This is typical of the military, Fran. They can train you in any kind of subject that you feel you're good at and that you've tested to be good at, but they cannot guarantee that you're going to work in it. You always have that military training. If you're in the military, not a partial conscientious objector, you have this military training, and that's always a backup for the military. In fact, they can promise you any kind of education that you're qualified for, but they cannot promise that you're going to work in it. Labored with that a lot, and in fact, I started attending a friend's meeting out in Philadelphia, in Phoenixville, and began to talk with people about my wondering about whether I'm doing the right thing. And it was during that time that I did a lot of soul searching, and I wondered why I did not choose to be a full conscientious objector. When I got out of the active duty side, I started applying for they keep you in the military for another four years as an active reserve. And I wanted to be discharged on the basis that I was a conscientious objector. And I filled out the papers, but I kept writing letters, and they never recognized me as a full conscientious objector. I worked with friends, and I became very skilled at what the draft law was all about. And I started doing draft counseling for young men who were wanting to apply for conscientious objection.
So we don't have a draft today, which is May 15th, 2006.
But we're sure that we're almost scared that it might come on any time. And what we're encouraging young people to do is to get ready for the draft. In other words, get their cases ready. So if they're if they have a persuasion towards conscientious objection, that they get their cases ready. And there's a whole formula of what should be in their file, their personal file, in order to get ready for when the draft happens. They'll need use that file to go to their draft board and convince them that he is their conscientious objector.
So this isn't something a young person can get the notice in the mail and go, oh, well, I'm going to be a conscientious objector. I don't really want to go.
That's right. What happens is that an 18-year-old will need to register. That's federal law. But what happens is that they're getting registered by people taking driver's licenses. The state of Minnesota is allowing Selective Service to take all these young people's names and send them draft cards before they have even said anything about whether they want to register or not.
So John, the first question I think that sort of capsulizes where we're going is, why is it so important that we have this interview now? What is the time urgency? Share with us what you feel.
Yeah, I have 3 different types of cancers that could be stamped as Agent Orange induced. There were other chemicals than Agent Orange.
You said at one point there were 16 chemicals that were used in Asia. Can you tell me more about that?
When they opened up the defoliation program they said that it was to open up fields of fire around bases, clear canopy, jungle treetops for aerial observation, and to destroy the enemy food supply. And we started going into areas to secure them. And that just means, by whatever means you have to utilize in order to secure it. We had to go out and search and look, see if we could find half a dozen of them. You might stumble onto 50 of them. You might even run into a company. But it was totally different than not only how we were prepared to make war, but it also affected how we would respond when attacked.
This is Vietnam. The black spots on the map show
Where they sprayed. Herbicide defoliation mission from 1965 to 1970. Now that's only a 5-year period. It was heavier, they sprayed in the house.
You told me a story about Agent Orange. What happened? You'd heard that like the same day it was sprayed, some Army or Marines were exposed to it, and there was flu and.
And actually, that thing about where we went to one place,
yes,
and cleared it, and we left to go to another one.
Yes.
Exactly. That second one, when we went to it, food type 4. Our whole unit that was within this base area just came down sicker and sicker than sick. The look on my mother's face when she saw me told me this is not good.
Right then.
I was really fit. I was very fit. Skinny to the max. Years later, you know, when we started looking at Agent Orange, the chemicals, and from here, the symptomology list that various things that it either, like all those things out there in the field that happened, or things that were happening later, where it wouldn't show up for a little while, and then all of a sudden the legs would just turn into this glowing red. We're talking about dioxin as the main chemical here. When the body processes and tries to clean out and tries to help us and does all that and does the best job it can, but as it's excreting, it's stored, while it's excreting, the poisons are touching different places.
Of course, yeah.
And reproductive system is real high on the sensitivity list. Children are starting to get born, and as they were starting to get born, percentages were being born with abnormalities, and some of them minor, cleft lip type, or you know, this or that. I've got a daughter that was the first child born.
So even.
But she's all screwed up from it. The thing that became obvious when we started looking at it was the government knew the toxicity of these chemicals. They withheld it intentionally in order to be able to use them. You know, war is very surreal. There's a point along the line where you just don't have a choice. I believe real strongly in principles that we were taught. And you know, you can look at it as the grand brainwash, if you will, but that truth, justice is supposed to be the American way. That is what was on my noodle at that time of going over. It started with a lie, and it ended with a lie on Richard Nixon, standing up and saying in '73 that all POWs were live POWs had returned, and we've now achieved peace with honor. In 1980, 7 years later, the Defense Intelligence Agency issued a list that talked about the 2,500 missing people from U.S. soldiers from Vietnam, and give or take 1,200 of them were alive, and they knew it. Something inside me says probably about 2/3 of the way through Vietnam, that my soul was dead. The rest of it didn't really matter. I was amazed by the lack of feeling in causing distress on other people. The Vet Center has a brochure that they put out that says, "Vietnam, let us help put it behind you." And that's what the battle was. And that's why I think I kept losing it so badly. Being that you cannot separate it from me. There is no putting it behind me. We were a generation of superly brainwashed kids. So, you know, parents too, everybody. But we were the ones that were doing that duck and cover for the atomic bomb test.
That's right.
Yeah, well, I think about these young ones going off now that are going in for economic regions, maybe away to college, which still comes down to economic reasons. But they're also operating just like we did without knowledge, being that the Constitution guarantees certain inalienable rights, which as soon as you sign up in the military, you sign away your coverage under the umbrella of the Constitution of the United States of America that we're supposed to be there defending. It's like with the Agent Orange gate.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the right to sue them, but Sheriff does.
Patrick, how old were you when you were inducted?
I was 18.
18. So in college?
No, I was just out of high school.
Why did you just go right into the military?
I did want to go to college, but I also didn't have great grades in high school, and I also thought that I would like to do something for my country and also for my community. Well, he took me out to eat, and he took me bowling, and he said that I'd be able to go to college while I was in, and he also told me that I would get a laptop if I went to college for free.
So could you go to college when you enlisted?
It was very difficult. You work 12 to 14-hour days at a time, and there's really no time for college.
How was basic training for you?
Basic training was a lot of yelling, a lot of degrading, humiliating you, breaking you down. I was a pretty good soldier. By the end of basic training, my drill sergeant didn't know my name. So, I mean, I never got in trouble, so I was an outstanding soldier, I guess.
So after basic, then what happened?
I went to train for my job, which was a power generator mechanic in Aberdeen, Maryland. Mm-hmm. And there it was pretty much the same thing, a lot of humiliation, degrading, training with your weapon. In basic training and in Aberdeen, we trained with an M16. Mm-hmm. We do qualifying, stuff like that. And I did pretty good.
All right.
It was my first time shooting a weapon. Yeah, she noticed I had changed. I had become really short-tempered compared to when I had joined. I was pretty calm and a loving person. I was kind of desensitized.
And sort of perfectionist.
Yeah, everything had to be perfect and clean and tidy all the time. At first it hurt our relationship, but I began to kind of realize that I was like that, and I tried my best to change, but it was almost something that's embedded in me after basic training. Go to my drills every weekend, and I enjoyed them. I made a lot of new friends, and I was also trying to go to school at the same time, which was kind of still difficult in the reserves. You don't get as much money as I thought I was going to get for college.
Oh, really?
You have to do so good in high school, and that depends on how much money you get in the Army. I felt like I wanted to continue and serve my country in a greater way and make it my job, my day-to-day job.
And you're like a 20-year commitment or whatever, I mean?
I had actually planned on possibly staying in for 20 years and retiring in the military. I went to my old recruiter, and he set me up with a active duty station, and I went to California. I was still low ranking. I didn't really have any charge over anyone, but we also trained other units that came in on rotations. Usually once a month, a unit would come in, and we'd spend 2 weeks out in the field once a month. They said that we were training them to prevent civilian casualties.
So what were these exercises like?
Well, we would live in a town for around 2 weeks, and we would be acting as Iraqis who lived in the town. Everyone got handed a role, and you had to abide by the role. And people wore what they call miles gear, which is a sort of advanced version of laser tag. Mm-hmm. So you can tell if someone dies or if someone is alive or wounded.
Oh, make-believe die, make-believe alive,
yeah.
Make-believe wounded. Mm-hmm. Okay.
At first I was pretty pumped. I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to be one of the best soldiers. My uniform was always crisp and well ironed. It was during around February. It was 3 months after I had went active. I had went to the library and I checked out Martin Luther King's autobiography.
Really?
I had always had an interest in the civil rights movement. That was as deep as that went, and I had a lot of time on my hands when I was out in the field, and I wanted some books to read.
So you read you're about 20 now, am I right?
About 20, yeah.
And you read Martin Luther King's autobiography. And then what happened? I mean...
Well, I sort of had a whole change of heart, a whole change of transformation within myself. I began to see what we were doing as wrong and promoting violence. Once I got done with Martin Luther King's book, I checked out at the Post Library Gandhi's autobiography, and I kind of went by who inspired Martin Luther King, and I also checked out Henry David Thoreau, Civil Disobedience. It was actually one time we were all ordered to draw our weapons, our M16s, to go out to qualify. Every 6 months you have to qualify with your M16. You have to hit a certain amount of targets in order to remain in the Army. Otherwise you become flagged from promotion and other activities. And I went through my chain of command and I told my first sergeant that I wasn't going to draw my weapon. Well, he took it to the commander, and the commander also asked me why, and I told him that I didn't believe it was right. I didn't want to go out to the field to qualify and practice handicapping or wounding or killing another human being. They told me that if I didn't go out, I would go to jail for disobeying an order, and they told me to put on my uniform, like put on my helmet and my LBE, and they would take me to jail, but they were actually trying to take me out to the field to qualify. I went to go speak to a chaplain. He recommended that I try for conscientious objection. I was really pleased to have common ground with someone. A lot of people looked down on me for what I did. I actually had refused to go out to the training. I didn't want to take any part in what was going on, any violence. I pretty much refused to fix power generators because I didn't want to be fixing stuff that was being sent to Iraq to aid the U.S. military in what they're doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. So
you didn't go out to the mock village. You didn't fix the power generators. So what are you doing? You're still in the Army. I mean,
yeah. I went through all the procedures of the Army regulation on conscientious objection. I wrote an 8-page essay of my life's history, basically, and why I had the transformation, how I had the transformation, and when it occurred exactly. And I had to give them a lot of proof.
Oh, you did?
That I was a conscientious objector. Every time it went to another level of the chain of command, I was re-questioned on what I believed, and they almost tried to trick me every time.
Really?
It took around a year and 3 months, maybe a year and 4 months, when it's supposed to take around 90 days. I had support from the National Lawyers Guild and the GI Rights.
Great.
And I also had support from a lot of my peers towards the end. There was a lot of people who had been to Iraq already.
Really?
And they had told me over and over that this is how they felt also, and they were just going to get out in a different way with a medical discharge, or just do the rest of their time and get out. It's kind of hard for people to go back. They become financially dependent on the military, and they get used to the check and the insurance and all of that. Right now I'm attending school at Minneapolis Community and Technical College. And I also manage a coffee shop right now. And I'm pretty active with the Veterans for Peace. I think they target a lot of teenagers that feel like they're alone in the world, and they want people who want to be their friends. And
Recruiter's your friend.
yeah, the recruiter wants to be your best friend. So.